Welcome to the Reclaim podcast. In this episode, the amazing Shivani joins us to share her knowledge on some of the fundamental elements which constitute well-being in an holistic sense. Shivani is the owner-operator of Prana Physio and Wellness, and in addition to being a compassionate, caring physiotherapist, she is also a clinical Pilates instructor, certified Hatha yoga teacher, and Vinyasa practitioner. Sit back and enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining me, Shivani. It's a long time coming. I think we talked about this at the beginning of the year, if not before. I think it was December last year. We couldn't quite get it together because of our respective schedules, but here we are.
Here we are. I'm very grateful to be here, so thank you for reaching out and having me on your podcast.
Lovely. So we're going to talk about holistic wellness. I know that's a very broad term, so we'll certainly cover off on some of those pillars, if you like, because well-being is, I think there's a misunderstanding about, not a misunderstanding, but there's lack of clarity of what well-being means. Does it mean just going to the gym, working out? Does it mean going for a run every morning? Does it mean healthy eating? It means all of those things. It's all of these pillars that work hand in hand, but we won't cover off on all of those because we'll be here for days. I think a good starting point would be just to clarify that wellness incorporates mental, your heart, and spiritual coherence. Would you agree?
Definitely. I would say wellness is a very broad term, as you mentioned. There's different lenses of what that could be, but wellness to me, the way that I like to look at it is, have you heard of the Wheel of Life?
I have.
Yeah, just maybe looking at it from that perspective as well, different aspects of life. So mental, emotional, physical, financial, social, there's so many aspects, and all of those factors are going to play into your own well-being in terms of how you feel, including spirituality as well. So I don't think I covered all of them, but that's what I would say wellness is, having a good, well-rounded approach in your life. And whilst that may not be perfect at all times, it's having those regular check-ins and making sure that you're filling in, the cups, those buckets, to then look after your health and wellness.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be an overwhelming undertaking. I find that you start with one aspect of wellness, it just organically leads into the next because you just feel that you need to incorporate all these other aspects as well. I think it just finds you, the whole process just finds you. If you're physically well and fit, you automatically want to find that deeper spiritual connection, or that's what I find anyway, that's what I found in my personal experience. But you brought up spirituality, and I think there's definitely been a shift in spirituality, a positive shift, but there's still, I think, a bit of a misconception about what it is. There's still some ideal that it's, all mystical and hippie. There's still that kind of notion out there. Whereas my idea of it is that it's just appreciating that we are beyond our bodies and, have this profound sense of connectedness that to me is spirituality. Whether that's a concept people are able to embrace or if they're ready to embrace it, all fair and well. But I think if we just clarify more what spirituality is and how people can become or allow themselves to become a little bit more spiritual, I think there'll be more people to take up that aspect of wellness.
Definitely. I think, as you said, there is a stigma or a identity or label that's associated with the term spiritual. It's often seen as or intertwined with religion.
Very much so.
I guess it's clarifying that spirituality is not religion. And before I say anything further, it's not to say that religion is bad or good. This isn't a conversation on what's right or wrong or what's good or bad. It's just clarifying the difference between the two for perhaps those that may not identify themselves with the religion itself, So I think spirituality is not a religion where you are tied down by certain protocols or certain guidelines of how one should live their life. Spirituality is a process of being open to what's more than just what we have here in the physical world. So it's just being open to perhaps quantum physics, it's being open to energy, it's being open to learning more about oneself and that process of, self-exploration, self-realization, self-discovery, to become more connected with us as a whole. There's so many different terminologies. I brought up quantum physics just in terms of the scientific terms that may be used, but again, they're different terms for very similar things, if not the same things. So being connected to the greater God, the universe, the cosmos, they're all the same thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Being connected to that, but also being more deeply connected to yourself. So it's more of a journey as opposed to being tied down to one religion or one practice, but it allows you to see what's going to be the right fit for you. It's not something that's as black and white, where if you do something, then that can be seen as taboo in, with that religion or within a certain culture.
And I think that's why that stigma still exists, because, like you said, it's still a bit of an abstract concept. Which is why people are reluctant to embrace it, some people. But I'm glad you brought up quantum physics, because the scientific world have embraced this invisible energy that's out there, that they've measured it, and it's irrefutably there. So for us, being spiritual, like you said, is just being aligned with that field or God or whatever label you want to apply to the force or energy out there. And spirituality, just the word itself, I think, or the term itself, like I said, it lends itself to old school ideas of hippie and flowers and butterflies, but it's being spiritual it takes a lot of work to get there. You have to be brave to confront all your demons, and because that's what you need to do to get there, to connect to your authentic self. You need to clear out all those buried toxicity that you're carrying. So spirituality is gangster. Like, it's not for the faint-hearted.
It definitely isn't. It takes conscious work and that willingness to be able to face oneself as well. We all have parts of ourselves where we have had the light but the dark as well, our shadows, and facing that in order to really come back home to ourselves. And another way that I like to view spirituality is just that process of, there's so many different processes within it, but that process of death and rebirth, the cycle of life, where you're shedding different layers and essentially, aiming to just move past the fake self and really highlight, I guess, and be the best that you can be in terms of becoming your higher self. And that can be a lifelong process if that happens, if someone chooses to take those steps at all, and if it happens within one lifetime or more, if that's something that people believe in. But just the higher self, where you are a universal being, in yoga the term's known as Brahman, and then Atman as well, which is your own being itself. So it's moving past the fake self, as we say, the ego of the mind, the body, the intellect, happiness. Everyone's seeking happiness, but moving past that and coming to just being within the universe, and that process of being yourself, which is a process of discovery.
So what are some of the modalities that can help bring you there, to that place of self-connectedness, if you like?
That's a great question. I think, look, there are many different tools. There's different practices, both within the Eastern world of medicine and the Western world of medicine. I'd say the Eastern world of medicine has been practicing this for thousands of years. The Western world at the moment, we can see a lot of changes in terms of being open to what spirituality is, having conversations like this, and really just moving on to learning a bit more about functional integrative medicine and just learning about the body and the human as a whole. So with the Eastern practices, there's practices such as yoga, there's Tai Chi, there's Qigong, there's other practices too within that. I'm more acquainted with yoga, and it's something that has been a part of my life for a very long time. I recently went to India end of 2022 and also did my yoga teacher training there, which was special both professionally and personally as well for my own journey. So through yoga, it's as we spoke about, that process of self-realization, but the union of both the body and the mind, and really learning how to conserve and build on your prana, which is what they called vital energy. It's like the electricity that we need for our body, our vessel, which is what carries us, our soul, if you believe in souls. So it's yoga will, there's different tools and techniques to help you to learn about that, the channels, how you can conserve it, how you can build on it. And what I mean by conservation and building is energy. We're talking about energy. So that can be through our food, sleep, exercise, the people that we are around, our social connections, the supplements that we're having. There's so many factors. Sex, sex is something that can also either build or generally, we can have reduced energy after it as well. So I think just looking at it as a whole. So having a look at, prana, how to conserve and build, detoxing and cleansing techniques as well. There's the asanas, which are the physical postures, pranayamas, which are the breathing techniques, meditation as well. So all of those things can help you be in a better position for deeper meditation as well. So all those practices are there to help you.
With yoga, so what style do you practice?
So I'm trained in traditional Hatha yoga, which is essentially the umbrella of yoga. So that's the original form of yoga, and then it's, stemmed into different styles after that. So I personally love Hatha for that mind-body balance and really just focusing on spinal alignment in general. I also practice Vinyasa. So Vinyasa is a little bit more fast-paced generally, more fluid and in flow. So they both work on very similar aspects, but there's slightly different sequences of how you would take a yoga flow, and perhaps there's, slightly different practices within that as well.
Are there stages? So let's say somebody never done yoga ever and wants to try it, and then would they find that particular style is too challenging? Or does that particular style have beginner, intermediate?
Yeah, so with yoga, with any style, there should always be a beginner, intermediate and advanced. So I think with any style that someone is drawn to, there's always a way to make it accessible for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of also having one-on-ones with a professional like myself is seeing, okay, well, what is going to be best for you, and what are you open to? What are your goals?
Yeah.
What is it that you would like? And that's a process of exploration in itself as well. I think it's great for people to trial different styles and see what's best suited for them, from their point of view. But then, of course, from a professional point of view, it's seeing what's that person's story? What are their goals? What are they hoping to achieve out of this? And then directing them in that way to see, okay, this style may be best for you as opposed to this one. But I think they're all really beneficial in their own ways. So it's really just a process of having that open discussion and seeing what's going to be best for that individual and helping them to build on that with where they're at. So it's meeting them with where they're at, because that can be different for everyone, but definitely very accessible within all the different styles.
What I found with guys in particular, especially guys that's still storing trauma and or need some help regulating their emotions, guys are more open to breathing, the breath work. That's really taking off when you want to break it down into genders, which I don't, but I just want to highlight that guys are more geared towards going for the breath work. It's becoming more and more popular. And I don't know what it is about breath work that attracts them, but it works. I mean, I before I tried breath work, I had no idea. I actually didn't think it'd be beneficial to me at all. But after the first couple of sessions, I found a profound sense of peace around it. So again, with breathwork, there are different styles and different forms of breathwork, right? I know you took a group of us. I was part of that group through a breathing session. It was a short session, and even then, you introduced me to a style of breathwork that I hadn't done before. I know there are different styles of breathwork, but the effect on the body is pretty much the same. Is that right?
Not necessarily. I mean, we've got our nervous system, our central nervous system, and when we see within that, you've got your autonomic nervous system.
Yep.
And then there's your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is your survival mechanism when your body can be in a fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And your parasympathetic nervous system is your mechanism of rest and digest. So that's generally when you may be feeling calmer, more grounded. So there's been different types of breathwork techniques developed over the years through different schools, where there's techniques that actually activate your sympathetic nervous system, and there's also other techniques that activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. With trauma release techniques as well, there's so many techniques within them that it's just so widely used, and it's a very broad term as well, because there's so many techniques on how you can release trauma these days. So that is something generally to the general public I would suggest really doing your research and just having a chat to the facilitator or who you're going into to help you understand what breathwork techniques is going to be performed. Generally, when you're learning about a technique that is going to help activate your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest, that is what most of us need, in this modern, fast-paced world, for a number of reasons, and something that is safe to do as well. Whereas with techniques that may activate your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, if there are pre-existing conditions or medical conditions, it can actually be unsafe to perform. So it is up to the professional and the facilitator to also communicate that to the individual participating in that experience. But if it isn't, it's great to just have that knowledge yourself and to take responsibility of your own body, because it can be unsafe. Some of those who are listening may or may not have experienced that, where they actually end up feeling worse, where it's really activating and triggering to the point where it's unsafe. So that's where, general comment, I would say that it's best to just go for techniques that are activating your parasympathetic nervous system. And if you're wanting to explore more, then it is great to go to a health professional that is aware of this and that can provide you with that safety, or a facilitator as well who is well versed in just having a basic understanding of the implications of what the techniques can do. So I would say even within the rest and digest, there's so many different techniques, and they do all have very similar effects of activating that pathway and promoting a deeper relaxation within the nervous system to ground oneself.
The one thing I haven't tried before, but I've always been curious to try it, is sound healing. Now, I don't know much about it at all, but there's one particular guy that's there's popular around Perth that does all these this phenomenal Luke Alani. He's amazing in that space.
Luke is amazing. At what he does.
Do you know much about what it does? Is it the same thing, just regulating your nervous system?
Similar analogies. It's another tool and technique that activates your parasympathetic nervous system, alters the brainwaves in a state of deep relaxation and, sleep at times as well.
So we touched on this just before we went on air. That's social connectedness. We talked a little bit about relationship connectedness or connections, but social connection, that's another important pillar, like you said, of wellness. We're social beings. We're not designed to be in solitude, solitude is nice to reset, but invariably we are social beings, and having healthy social connection is extremely important. Problem is identifying when your social connections aren't serving you, like having the discernment to say, that's not working for me. I need to sever that tie. And I think with those social connections, once you are realigned with yourself, with your authentic self, it gets to the point where you can't sustain relationships that don't work for you. And I'm not talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about just friendships and general. Like, you just can't, or you won't tolerate as much as you used to when you were living in static or noise. If those people around you aren't serving you, you're better off severing those ties. It's brutal, it's uncomfortable, but it's a very necessary process. Would you agree?
I agree, yes, and I think there's different ways to perhaps be mindful of the relationships. It can either just be having a little bit more of a distance, so you can still have those relationships, but just having an understanding of what that relationship is, and what that exchange is between the two of you. How is that relationship serving you? Keeping it at a distance, or in some ways, sometimes it is best just to eliminate a relationship altogether for certain reasons. So I think it really just depends on that relationship. But it's definitely important to be very mindful of, who we spend time with. And time, for one, is precious, and it's limited. It's limited in the physical world, but there's, of course, beyond that, when we talk about spirituality, we go beyond time and space as well.
Look, we all like comfort zones, I think. And sometimes that social connection or the unhealthy friendships, I think that's just we become so comfortable with the familiar, and stepping out of that might seem a bit too daunting.
It definitely can, because as you mentioned, you said it feels familiar, and sometimes what feels familiar may not always, it may feel safe, but it may not always be what you need. So I think in terms of getting outside of the comfort zone, as we talk about, like that's an example where being in an unsafe environment doesn't always mean that it's not going to be healthy for you. Or it doesn't mean that that's not going to be the relationship for you. So it's it's definitely it's a process to really just check in and see, okay, well, if this is feeling safe, and this, if something else is feeling unsafe, why? Why are they both feeling safe and why are they feeling unsafe? And actually that process of introspection, because there's two sides to the coin here. Something that is unsafe is genuinely unsafe, but something that is unsafe can also be something that is healthy, as mentioned.
The hot topic at the moment out there is domestic violence. And I've seen this in my previous career in law enforcement, like predominantly women stay in these toxic relationships because, for a number of reasons, that because it's familiar, because they're scared of leaving, and also when they're in a narcissistic empath type relationship, and those two often combine. The narcissist is always attracted to the empath and vice versa. And the reason they stay in that, the empath stays, is because they see or they project so much good onto this narcissist that may not even exist. You're just projecting onto your partner and kind of hoping that you could make them change. But when you become more spiritually aligned, you have a stronger discernment of what is going to be healthy for you and what you need to cut off. Like we said at the start, one thing leads into the next with wellness. It really does, Movement is another important aspect. Everybody knows this, that we're not designed to be sedentary. Our bodies are designed for movement. We're designed to be active. But oftentimes people don't do it. Like, they have the knowledge that they have to do it, but they have excuses. Like, you might come up with an excuse like, I've had the long day and the conditions have to be right for me to exercise, and it's always if this, then that. There's always that cause and effect, really.
Yeah. It's very true. And, inactivity at the moment is actually a lot more prominent than we think it is. Around your circle and my circle, we might have people around us that value health and are moving every single day. But when we look at, the science behind it and the studies that have been done, obesity is an epidemic at the moment. It's one of the leading causes of other diseases and death as well, and that one of the main precursors to that is inactivity, is just leading a very sedentary lifestyle, whether that's prolonged sitting with the nature of someone's job or being inactive in terms of not getting enough movement, if not anything, throughout the day. So movement is one component to well-being, but something that is definitely very important to prevent pain, injuries, and also disease and death in the long term. And of course, these are things that you can do for prevention, to be proactive for those things, not only to feel good but to prevent that. But it's also important to know that no one has certainty on disease and death as well, but all we can do is just show up the best that we can and do the best that we can to then prevent those things occurring, and also improving the quality of life and really building on longevity.
And when we talk about movement, automatically people's minds go to, I've got to sign up for a gym. And if that doesn't work for you, then don't do it. Don't sign up for a gym. Go and play tennis. Go and dance. Go and do lawn bowls. Whatever works for you, you know. Walking in nature. And I know you're an ocean girl. You're a water baby. So find what you're aligned with and amplify it and nurture it. But look, I have been, in my previous career, like a sedentary point of view, was stuck behind a desk for sometimes 12, sometimes 14 hours. So the last thing I want to do is exercise after that. But there are things in place, like got to be stuck in this office for 12 hours. I have quite a few breaks during the day, you know. I have a lunch break that I can go for a walk in. So utilise that time. It's half an hour that you can use being outdoors, getting the fresh air and taking in nature and all these good things.
Exactly. And with, you know, because I have a few clients that come in who are desk workers as well and have similar challenges. I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's something that's very common, and it's not only important to actually have that time to move before the work day. There's benefits to that, but throughout the day as well, as you said, just finding those little moments where you can get some movement, because I'm not sure if many people know this, but studies have actually shown that if you're having a break from sitting from your desk, from your work every 45 minutes to an hour, it's not only going to help you physically in terms of how it's going to influence your muscles and your bones, but it's also going to enhance your productivity and your focus as well. So we think that we're sitting at the desk, you know, for 8 hours straight, being really productive because we're not having a break, but in fact, it can be more counteractive, you know, so it leads to less focus, less attention, maybe just, you know, social media is a big distraction these days. So unless there's protocols around that, it's how often is someone reaching for that? You're still seated for that, right? So there's so many reasons, maybe a different topic, but so many reasons as to why someone's attention span can be reduced. But just sitting at that desk when, if you're getting up every 45 minutes to an hour, it could be, instead of having the water bottle at your desk, maybe you can just have a glass. So getting up to fill the glass every 45 minutes to an hour, so you're making sure you're hydrating. You know, if someone has calls that they need to take, maybe actually standing, having a little walk around and, you know, getting some movement whilst you're on that call, if that's a possibility, of course. I know that there's certain things that may or may not be done at a workplace, but everyone's probably in the same boat. And I think it's just really starting a bit of a trend is what I tell my clients, start a bit of a trend. Everyone's in the same boat, and it's just, those little bits of movement or things that you can do at the desk as well, which is, you know, whether that's something that they look up or something that they seek professional advice for, that's something that's given as well. Okay, what are the best exercises that you can do to just get some movement through the body that you don't have to go to the gym for, that you don't need to lay down, but what can I do just to get some, you know, movement through the body where I'm reducing tightness and stiffness through the hips, the spine, the back, the shoulders, the neck, which is, they're all very common areas for desk workers.
Oh, absolutely. I can certainly attest to that. So this job that I was at, it was, I mean, the office we were in was, the environment was very unhealthy. What I mean by that is it was an office within an office. So it was, because the work we were doing was quite sensitive and had to be, it was kind of top secret. So it was, you had to go through, we called it the vault because essentially it was like a bank vault. So there's no natural light, no anything. So that was in itself was an excuse to go out every 45 minutes and get some fresh air. The other reason for me was that if I sat any longer than the 45 minutes, the pressure on my lower back and upper shoulders, because it's hunched over a computer, was horrendous.
I guess just to add to that as well, you know, those breaks are there is also to just let go for a moment, right? So it's not the need to find another moment in time to be productive, because the mind needs rest as well for you to be productive and for you to function at your best. The body needs rest if you're training, you know, for an event in particular. Like athletes need rest, you know, that's what that relative rest is there for. Just like with the mind, as you said, those breaks are there for you to actually have a break, not to be productive. So doing what you need to do in your time to actually just have a moment to pause and have an actual break. And if you're going outside, close your eyes, maybe just feel the sun on your face, come back to your breath. We've spoken about the power of breathing. And again, it doesn't have to be a 20-minute breathwork session, but in terms of real-time tools that you can use throughout your day to regulate the stress that you may be feeling from the workday or otherwise, and actually just recalibrating and resetting both the body and the mind. Take 3 deep inhales and a big physiological sigh, and there's studies that have shown as well that that's probably the quickest way that you can regulate your nervous system and actually give yourself that time to ground and just come back to clarity and focus and feeling good again, instead of just feeling like you're going from one thing to the other.
Yeah. So we talked about some of the aspects that fall under the wellness umbrella. Now your practice is aptly called Prana Physio and Wellness. When did you launch that?
So I launched that in May last year, so May 2023. It's about May, April, so it's already been a year. It's gone by very quickly. Time has flown in a great way. There's been challenges, opportunities, both professionally and personally, and I'm very grateful.
One thing I do know is that you, very recently I've noticed that you prepare a lot of athletes for events, like you had some people do an ultra marathon, you've done 0 to hero hike. So tell us about that, like what you do. Is it that kind of service, like more of a preparation for athletes, or it's like prevention of injury, or is it post-injury rehab, or both?
All of the above, I would say. Physiotherapy and holistic physiotherapy is there's a lot within the profession. There's a lot more within the profession that people may think, and also in terms of what I do. Stereotypically, physiotherapists have more so just been known for their treatments, the hands-on treatments. And I think there's still, whilst it's changing over time and people like myself are creating that change, there's still this perception that, one needs to be in pain, injured to go to the physio, or, mainly just to go and get some hands-on treatment. But I think it's important to know that like physiotherapy, and especially holistic physiotherapy as well, is there to help educate people on, the body, the mind, health and wellness, and how they can prepare for certain events in a better fashion and be proactive, or to also just be proactive in general with their health and wellness if longevity is something of value to them. So it's changing or reframing the mindset of, I don't have to be in pain to seek help, but I actually can still be where I'm at, pain-free. And if I do value my health physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and it's something that I want to improve on, not to say that, again, someone's not enough with where they're at, but if that's something of value, then seek that help from now. And it may also just be a lot more, it will be a lot more cost-effective in the long term, because you're one step ahead, you're having less sessions, it may be more financially affordable as well, where you can break it down. There's a plan, to help you to get to where you want to be. So I would say I help people, it's again very widely used now, but genuinely be their best version of themselves, genuinely, and on all those different levels. Of course, being a physio, I'm a movement expert, I'm a movement specialist, where there's different forms of movement that I can assess and help guide people back into, but it's also those other qualifications and forms of knowledge, with it being a holistic approach of, there's a very thorough subjective history where I'm listening to that person's story, I'm listening to what their intentions for the session are and what they're wanting. There might be various goals, but it's important to recognize that there's so much depth to those different areas that it does need to be prioritized. What's the most important thing in this session, and what are the steps that we need to take to get to, firstly, the short-term goals, the mid-term goals, and then the long-term goals as well. And again, breaking it down physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And there's various tools and techniques that I take my clients through, both passive and active, but also if there are other health professionals that may add even more value, then I will also just mention that in conversation. And, this might be beneficial, for example, whether it's seeing a psych, I think I am trauma-informed and a very safe person to speak to, and a lot of my clients generally just do without being questioned. But there's certain things that may be best to share with others that are experts within their own field. It may not always be the case that someone needs to be referred. I think it's a very safe space, as I mentioned, and there's always room to just have a conversation, because as much as physio is about movement, in order for me to help someone to move better and to feel better and to achieve their goals, I also need to get a better understanding of who they are, what other struggles they're going through, and it's something that affects the body physically as well. The brain has a direct correlation with the body, and the body has a direct correlation with the brain as well. So that mind-body connection in various aspects. So I would say just helping guide people through pain that they're experiencing acutely, something that's just happened, or something that they've had for a couple of weeks subacutely, or chronically as well. If they've had long-standing pain, maybe seen multiple professionals, they've lost hope. So, I'm quite passionate about that as well, because it's a process of not only just helping someone with their pain, with that type of pain. Studies have shown that the biopsychosocial factors in terms of the biology, the psychology, the social environments as well, and their experiences of the past and the present can have a massive influence on the pain experience, like how pain is modulated and the pain relief that they're going to get as well. So that's why it is a holistic approach, because there's so much evidence to show that it's not only just about the hands-on treatment you do, the power of movement, of physical activity, of course, like the specific exercises you need to do for that area, but then also tapping into all those other areas to help with that person's pain relieving journey and more, not just being relieved of pain, but also what do they want to achieve functionally. So it doesn't have to stop there. And then athletes, I've been someone who I've loved movement from a young kid. I've always been into sports like tennis, golf, swimming. So those were my sports back in the day, and I've always just loved moving and also loved moving outdoors. So because I love it so much and I see the power of it, like scientifically, but also having experienced it within my own body for different reasons, it's something that I love helping others who are like-minded get back to as well. And it's quite fulfilling, not only for the client, but also for myself to if they have a pain or injury and they've got an event and there's a shorter time frame, actually just going through that process and giving them hope again, or just, whether it's doing the event or not, whatever it is, just actually that process of problem solving. I'm here to, actually take things step by step, assess it very thoroughly, create a treatment plan that's individualized to that person and their goal. Like, what's meaning footy? Is it actually completing the event or not completing the event? And, sometimes it may be that it might just more so be pain management, of course, with the aim to get there completely pain-free, but at times it can be that for athletes too. It's not a black or white approach. I think it's something that I'm passionate about, to then just go through more of the active side, not only the hands-on treatment to help manage the pain and facilitate recovery, but also giving others more tools to rehab that pain or injury. Also just be proactive, as you said, like if they're not in pain, how can they improve their performance, through movement, through nutrition, through sleep, through water, like all the pillars of health. And again, just doing the best within the capacity that I have, or the knowledge base that I have, and if needed, of course, referring them on to others, or if they're already seeing other coaches as well, then making sure that we're all working together without overlapping, but also just giving the person the best value.
And for me, initially I thought I had a high pain threshold. I did find out that it was just me being used to living with pain for so long. Now that I'm pain-free, I realise that, but also what I'm guilty of is that self-diagnosis. I went to Google and just punched in my symptoms. I've changed my behaviour now. Like, I don't practice that anymore, because I certainly didn't do myself any favours. Like, it became a real problem. Like you said before, the rehab process could have been so much shorter had I sought help at the right time, and that's what I would encourage people to do, like not to prolong it and not to self-diagnose, which I've done, because it doesn't lead to good things, you can have a look, but definitely get that professional opinion.
Yeah, it's a great tool that we have these days, that everything is just there at our fingertips. But as you mentioned, it can also, especially with pain and health conditions, it can actually sometimes just instill a lot more fear within the individual, all depends on someone's personality as well. So I think, yes, it's good to to self-explore and to self-educate, but I'd say generally it's always best to just seek professional advice. And of course, just make sure you're aligned with that person, have a look at the reviews, see what service that you're actually receiving to ensure that you're going to receive what it is that you need. It's important to find someone that's aligned with you, but that person is also then just going to save you from the trial and error process, from just fear that you may not necessarily need to have in the first place. So it's important to seek that expert advice just to hit the nail on the head and have it thoroughly assessed and treated, and for you to be given a treatment plan as well.
I have had such a great time talking to you. Really thrilled that you found some time to come along. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm very grateful as well. It's flown by. Who would have known? Would have flown by. This is something outside of my comfort zone, but I'm so glad that I've gone outside of my comfort zone myself, and just honoured to be on a podcast like this with you, to be able to just share knowledge, and hopefully more. I think we're just scratching the surface today.
We absolutely are.
They're all very big topics to talk about. So hopefully we can chat about that sometime soon as well.
We certainly will. Until next time.
Yes.
See you then.
All right. See you. Thank you.